Welcome, Jimmy. How are you?
Hey.
So wonderful to have you join us today. Jimmy Blanchette, everyone. Really excited to have you with us. So, Jimmy, tell us, please, to begin with, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about where you grew up, maybe. Tell us about a little bit about your background personally.
Sure. Well, first, it's great being on your show, Shahiroz. Thank you so much for
Thank
the
you. Thank
opportunity
you.
and for providing this wonderful platform to share important information. So I'm actually born in Quebec, Canada, the French province of Quebec, Canada. Um, it's pretty up north, actually, about 200 kilometers north of Quebec City. From there, a small village, kind of small village area. Come from a very humble family. And so I stayed in that province for, good part of my life. I studied there, the Quebec Laval University there. I studied in chemistry. I have a bachelor degree in chemistry. And I'm also very passionate about radio communication, as my background shows.
So were you always passionate about radio communication, like as a child growing up, or what was your interest as a child growing up? Like,
yeah, well, Yes, I was interested from the very early on. I like, I like to practice a lot of sports too. I was at the time in Quebec. I played a lot of ice hockey and
oh,
martial
fun,
arts,
nice.
but the radio had a special place in my heart because for me that was a way to connect with the universe and a way to get out of my little town. It was kind of very remote little town, small village.
So
And
what created the interest in the universe for you? Like, when we're growing up, we're so set in our ways in our life and school. And what created the interest in the universe? Did you have some kind of experience as a child, or?
I was always interested from the early on. I was fascinated.
Wow.
I remember at a very young age to just lay in the snow with all my gear. Of course, it's cold there. It's minus 30 Celsius.
Yeah.
During the winter with wind.
Yeah.
But I remember just laying in the snow and just watching the stars. We had beautiful skies without light pollution. Of course, it was amazing. I was always highly fascinated by that, and yeah, and it's been in me. It's just like I'm born with that interest. I
Wow.
was, and as I said, it was a way also like the radio side of things was a way for me to get out of my town and connect,
Yeah.
to open myself up to the world. Really,
Right.
that was it. Um,
So
and
where did it go from there? You had a love and a passion for stars. Did you
mhm.
get into astronomy or astrology or anything like that, or?
I studied. I had classes in astrophysics, astronomy,
Oh, wow.
all the good stuff. I kept, being highly interested into this subject, and I became also early on very interested in the ancient sites, ancient sacred sites, pyramids
Ah,
of Egypt, and all these monuments around the world were fascinating to me. Um, just from the physics of it and how this could even be done,
right.
and all the mathematics. And when you start digging deeper into these subjects, you
Hmm.
start realizing there's highly complex mathematics that didn't make sense, that they couldn't have had that kind of knowledge at the time. It just
Right.
didn't make sense. And so I was very intrigued by that aspect as well. And kind of naturally was also very into are we alone, right? And for me, the probability of being alone when you start, when one starts studying this, even mildly, and realizing the size of the universe we're in, it's
Hmm.
just, can't be
Absolutely.
alone, right? It's just the probability of being alone for me was zero. And I had no doubt about that. And again, this becomes connected now to these ancient sites because there are paintings, there are stories, and
Yeah.
it kind of makes a full-blown story by itself. All
Right.
that.
Okay. So, in your career path, did radios play a role?
I had actually I got jobs because I was an amateur radio operator. I got my license really at in
Wow.
my teenager years. I was very technical, highly oriented with electronics.
Okay.
Although I was I now have a bachelor degree in chemistry, I was always highly into electronics and engineering and so forth. So I was really I did a lot of work with radio engineering, pretty much throughout my life. Building antennas also was my passion, really. Building antennas took a lot of my, it was just a hobby at the time, but it was kind of all coming together,
So how I met Jimmy was he contacted me because he attended a meeting with David Sarita and Sasha, and they were doing a presentation on 432, and Jimmy said, well, I'd like to talk to you, and tell you what I'm doing. And so I'm going to let Jimmy now tell you what exactly he shared with us after that meeting with Sasha and David, after viewing that presentation, and what the connection is. And so Jimmy, why don't you go ahead now and tell everyone why the intrigue in the pyramids, the 432. What was it that intrigued you about it? What have you been doing, and what have you been up to?
Well, really, what led me to digging into this and this subject matter was the first step to even get there was my interest in contact work, human initiated contact work, which started in 2017, really, in terms of being more active and just trying it. I had seen videos, on the internet about it. I had, obviously there's a lot of information floating around about it. I was intrigued, on this, and I knew we were not alone. There was no doubt about it, but, to make actual contact is,
that's a different story.
It's a different story, right? Yeah. But even before getting there, 2017, what led me to be more active, and I think, have different type of experience. In 2013, I became interested in a communication technique called moon-bound communication. It's a very exotic.
What exactly is moon-bound communication?
It's a very exotic amateur radio contact modality, which consists in using the moon essentially as a passive reflector in order to, essentially we take an antenna and beam massive, powerful beams of radio wave towards the moon, and using the moon as a reflector, the front wave is reflected back towards Earth, or a part of it, a small portion of it is reflected back towards Earth. So using the moon this way, one can make a two-way communication on Earth, with stations, radio stations all over the world, really.
So can you give us examples of other applications of this in the world right now, like who's using it, or who's doing what with this ability to moon bounce?
Well, I know it's used in amateur radio communication. Again, it's very small segment of people who do that because it requires very sophisticated equipment, expensive equipment, and so forth, and large antenna system, very sensitive equipment. And so it's not like, something that everybody does, obviously. And I know it was utilized during the Second World War. At the time there was no internet or no satellite. And so I know that it's been developed during the Second World War as a way to communicate, from one continent to another. I do not know if there are other applications, in terms of civilian or military, and possibly, I'm not aware of it. But I know that, that's what I was attracted to it. So in 2013, I heard about it for the first time. I had never heard of that before. And I said, well, that sounds like a very interesting challenge. And I said, there's no way in the world that I'm not going to try to meet that challenge. It was just too wonderful or fascinating to me. I felt I needed to do this. So, being an antenna builder, I started building antennas and gathering information to do this. It's not only antenna, you need a lot of other equipment as well, of course, electronic equipment, and to make all that work. But I started working towards that goal. And so really mid 2013, I succeeded to make my first contact, two-way communication using the moon by a moon bounce.
So when you say contact, we're talking contact with another entity, another being, another planet.
Oh, well, I'm not there yet. So in 2013, when I made contact, it was with human beings. It was with other amateur radio in the world at that time. That's when I made my first contact, and I just kept, and I wanted to improve my radio station equipment. So I kept, working on the design of the antenna and try to improve it to get better reception and have more power out, right? And so I started developing in the 2014 time frame. I have some dates here exactly. I started developing an antenna system called TARP, which stands for Triangular Array Rotatable Polarity. And it's a
now, did you coin that phrase, or it existed out there before, or?
No, this was completely new. Again, this equipment is kind of set up to do moon-bound communication. Some can purchase some equipment or antennas commercially, but they are very expensive and rare. I decided to build it myself, to build a model that was, it was all homemade. Really, everything was homemade, 100%. And so, I started with a model in mind that allowed also to, because step back a little bit, when we do moon-bound communication, the polarity of the radio wave is very important, right? So if you receive a signal vertically polarized and your antenna is set up horizontally, you're not going to hear anything, right? It has to be a polarity match. And so that's a big challenge in the field. And so I came up with a system where I could actually rotate the polarity of the antenna at will using a motor system and software and electronic. And that's why it's called rotatable polarity, right? So I have a...
And so when you say software, did you have to write software specific to this antenna, or something existed?
That did not exist. I partnered, I was contacted by a systems engineer, was, very, very smart gentleman, who was very interested in my antenna design. So he started working with me and create a small application or software.
There we go.
Work with all that and build all the electronics that could control. So I worked with him for several months on the system. That part was more focused on the software, if you will, on the rotatable polarity. But the antenna design itself was just all my design. I use a very sophisticated software to do that. It's like a CAD software. You can put your model and then you see what the resulting radiation patterns is, based on the configuration. And then something happened in 2000 while I was working on actually the way this antenna model came to me. There's a little story about this. About it.
Go ahead, please.
So I was actually at the beach on a long chair, enjoying a tequila at the time. I still remember, and all of a sudden, this triangular configuration just popped in my mind, just as a download, if you will, a flash. And I realized, I said, wow, okay, that's I need to explore this. So I just jumped off of my chair and ran into my hotel room where I had my computer and started modeling this design that I just,
saw in your head.
Yeah. And what came out of it was, amazing. The radiation pattern was of an extreme purity, and it was really a breakthrough in that field, at least from everything that I had seen so far. So that's why I started.
So can I ask you what you think caused you to have that download or that flash? Have you ever had downloads or flashes like that before that have guided you into like, what was it? What do you think it was?
Yes, well, it's interesting you asked the question. I've had throughout my career these instances of flashes or download of like ideas of creating things that do not exist, right? For instance, I published I made discoveries back in the early 2000s in chemistry. There were big challenges related to the chemical analysis of metal and alloys and ferroalloys. Often they use this for, to make airplanes and things like that. And doing the chemical analysis of these material was very challenging. And I had this download, if you will, this idea of applying a very specific chemical treatment to enable that and essentially turn these metals into a glass disc, which you can literally see a glass disc like a little pellet. And so I published scientific papers about it in magazine and renowned scientific journals. So I would say this in the early 2000s was probably the first time I had kind of big, something big coming up that was really a discovery, if you will, that's now used by the National Institute of Standard and Technology as a standard method that they use now
Right.
to analyze metals and alloys.
Right.
So I've had a little bit of history of that. So this was probably the second biggest one, I would say, that was significant. So just, popped in my mind. And often in a shower, I have these, when I'm in the water, often I have more of these downloads or ideas. I don't know why, but it's just this pop up.
Right. Yeah. Well, this time you were on the beach, so they probably happen when you're very relaxed, in a state of relaxation. And do you believe that there's somebody looking out for you or trying to guide you to do a certain thing, or do you believe this is just random?
Well, I have indications now that there's something behind this, because some of the work I've done recently over the last couple of years, for instance, and we can get more into it a bit later when we get deeper into the subject. Mathematically, there's certain things that I've done that there's like a chance in a million that it could be, right. It's like you get I do something, and with the speed of light, you get to a number that's exactly to the dot, dot zero, and it's a chance in a million. So I think, and we're all guided in some way. All humans have this capability for open ourselves up. Information will come, and we just need to. We are antennas ourselves. I mean, that's what it is. Our DNA itself is an antenna. We are antennas, and so if we're tuned to it, we get things that are beyond what we perceive. Really.
Absolutely. We are antennas. Our spine's an antenna, and like you said, our DNA can serve as an antenna. So absolutely. So back to your design now, because you were talking about that, and I kind of took you off track. So go ahead and tell us about TARP.
Sure. So I worked on this antenna system extensively and brought it to completion. I published 2 scientific papers about it, because it was a new design that did not exist at all on the planet. So published 2 papers, and I was fortunate enough that it made also the cover page of a German magazine or European magazine, very specialized in radio frequency and microwave communication and things like that. So completed the design, and then in 2017, that's where we're getting closer, 2017, I became interested in human-initiated contact. As I said, I was intrigued. I was always passionate about the universe, and I knew we were not alone. So I said, I need to do this. And naturally, since I had this large equipment, and this antenna system, by the way, is literally as big as my house. It's huge. And the power that, all the amplifiers I have here, I mean, the system is capable of deploying over 150,000 watts, 150 kilowatts of power. So it's massive amount of power.
So for the sake of the audience, can you give them a comparison of what 150,000 watts represents?
Yes, absolutely. If we take a typical AM radio station that, if you tune to a regular AM radio station, many of them will be 5,000 watts, 5 kilowatt, 10 kilowatts, 15 kilowatts, in that range. The most powerful AM radio station, the maximum limit typically will be around 50,000 watts, right? The KFI AM radio in Los Angeles, for instance, close by here, which is a huge, very powerful station, is 50 kilowatts, 50,000 watts.
Wow.
So 150,000 watts is 3 times that. And the other thing is that we need to also talk about power density, because the power is not everything. The bandwidth on which we transmit is important, right? So an AM radio, typically the bandwidth is about 10 kilohertz or 10,000 hertz of the bandwidth, right? So your power is diluted, in 10,000 hertz, right? So you could make that calculation, the power density, you divide the watt, let's say the 50,000 watt by 10,000 hertz, and you get 5 watts per hertz, right? That's your power density, right? So this is the most powerful radio station I'm talking about, 5 watts per hertz. Now, the TARP system with 150,000 watt, I can transmit certain frequency with only very, very narrow bandwidth, let's say 100 hertz. Now, the 150,000 watt divided by 100 gives like 1,500 watts per hertz. So we compared 1500 watts per hertz versus 5 watts per hertz for the biggest radio station in Los Angeles. It's like 2 orders of magnitude stronger, right? So the power density even is more powerful than the most powerful commercial radio station, if you will. So this is the magnitude we're talking about in terms of power density. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So back to TARP then, and you said you got it on the cover of a German magazine. So tell us about that. How did that make you feel, or tell us about your accomplishment there a little bit.
Sure. Well, I was excited that, when you build something from scratch with your hands and you don't buy it, you just build it. And I had to do everything with my own hands. That's what makes me feel, accomplishment, right? It's an accomplishment. I was very excited about it and got more and more absorbed into it. And so, once you have something done, you're already thinking about what's going to be the next step, the next iteration, if you will. It doesn't end, right? So yeah, that was very excited about it. And I got this system got a lot of interest. And actually now there are people in the amateur radio community who have replicated the system. I've not hidden it or anything. I share it. People can benefit. So they've replicated actually the rotatable polarity, but I've not seen anyone yet creating a TARP system, a triangular system. It requires there's a lot of mechanical parts into this. When you have an antenna system as big as a house, and this system is like, I should point out that the antenna system is designed to create a beam, right? Like a laser beam of radio wave. So it's directional. So if you want to, target a specific, let's say the moon, well, you need the whole antenna system to be able to go in elevation and also in azimuth like this. So it requires rotator system, a lot of cable. So it's complex. So not everyone really.
So and it's absolutely necessary for it to be that big, or else this whole process doesn't work, right? You can't do it with a little mini version.
if you want to have that power, you need to have that size. The antennas, it's not random. When you build antennas, the wavelength or the frequency will dictate the length of the elements that you use. And so if you want to have more power, then you need to add elements, and it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And so, more power, bigger, more power, is really the rule.
So size matters.
The size matters.
Okay, show us your show us some presentation. Show us
sure. Okay, let me
tell us about.
Do you want me to share the slides I have on it?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Oh, perfect.
So this is we see on the right side here. This is a representation of the TARP system. We see a bit the size.
Look at that, eh?
Yeah, it's hard to see, but it's it's really literally as big as a house in terms. It's a pretty large system, and as you can see, there's a lot of components, rotator system.
Well, it looks intricate.
Million cables, and it's sensitive equipment as well. So this is a tricky design. So this is the picture of it, and we see here what I discussed earlier.
So when you say triangular system, what represents the triangle here?
Well, the triangular, if we look at the configuration, right, it does a triangular. If you take from the back of the antenna, if you
Oh, I see it now. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's really a triangular shape.
Yeah.
And we see also what I discussed earlier, the timing, 2013, the timeline that we talked about, described here of what went on from 2013, 2017, before I got into human-initiated contact. I had an experience in 2015.
So what humans did you communicate with? Like, where did you communicate? I understand it was human contact, but what was that exactly?
Well, they're all, as I said, there's a very, very small community, amateur radio community, which, does moonbound communication. They have, very large equipment as well. So we have fun to communicate with each other, and it's not with voice, by the way. This is all digital communication. The signals, when they bounce off the moon, the signal coming back are very, very weak, and then typically the signal will be buried in the background noise, literally. And the signal can be as weak as 100 to 1,000 times weaker than the background noise itself.
Wow.
So we cannot even hear the signal. But with computer technology nowadays, you're able to go and extract this very,
you can
very
extrapolate the signal.
quick signal. Yeah. And you can, and so it's a digital communications. We send literally text, you know. Some do Morse code as well. It's possible to do Morse code. I do that via the moon as well, so that's possible. So you can hear it, but with your ear, but it's extremely weak, right? So it's challenging. You need to have good ears to do that.
Wow. Okay. So 2014 to 2016, you worked on the TARP, and in 2015 it says you had a mystical experience. Can you tell us about your mystical experience?
Sure. Yeah, I'll be happy to. So it was, I had a guided meditation with a lady, and I had, you know, I was invited during that guided meditation to picture like a light table. That's really a table of light.
Okay.
And I was invited or asked to invite my guides, right? That's what the guided meditator was kind of, you know, guiding me through. And so I went along with the, you know, with the exercise. I had not, you know, been really a big meditator, quite honestly, in my life. You know, my brain is so busy and I always think about things that, you know, so that, you know, it was a first experience for me, really. And so, so I went along with that, and so I was invited again to ask my guides to join me at that light table that I had kind of pictured mentally, if you will. And to my surprise, there were 3 beings that showed up.
So did you see your guides? Yeah, you did.
The three beings showed up. One was very tall, bright light, very tall, bright light. 2 other beings of different configurations, really. They were all humanoid type, but the light being was less humanoid. So it's more, you know, etheric, if you will. The 2 others were a bit humanoid, but kind of look more solid. They look more like ETs, to be honest, than spirit guides or anything. Although, you know, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Anyway, they showed up at the table, and
hold on, Jimmy. Sorry, hold on. Not to pause you for a second. There's a sighting of sorts our own here. There's a double rainbow. Someone called me out to see the double rainbow.
Oh wow, that's nice. Must be because of our call.
Beautiful. So when we get off the phone, yeah, like she's like this. It's like, and it is. It's double. There's one after the other. That's amazing.
Wonderful.
Okay, carry on. I'm so sorry about that.
No worry. So
you're at the light table. The beings show up. One of them is tall and etheric and a light being, and the other ones are humanoid, but we can't really describe really what they are.
That's right.
From there, carry on.
From there, the next thing that happened, the guided meditator invited me to ask them what was my purpose in life, why I was incarnated on this planet, essentially.
Right.
And so I, you know, mentally kind of formulated that question, and the reply came back actually surprised me. Even that there was reply coming back was surprised me, but the reply that came back said,
right.
You already know why you are here. Why are you asking? So I was taken by surprise by that answer.
Taken back by that.
Yeah, very surprised by that answer. And immediately after that, the 2 words that showed up in front of me were first contact. I mean, just like engraved in rock, like if you will, boom, that's just right in front of me.
Oh my God.
And at that precise moment also, I had a very strong feeling, very, very strong feeling, hard to describe, that all the antenna system I was working on will had to do something with it. But at the time in 2015, I was not into human initiated contact. And so I didn't understand.
So you put 2 and 2 together at this point after this mystical experience, that now your antenna is not necessarily just for any purpose, but to make contact, not just with humans, but maybe other beings. Is that correct?
Right. I clearly felt there was an association, but at the time, I didn't have anything to relate it to, in the sense that I was not
Right.
into,
Right.
contacting
Metaphysics.
civilizations or
Yeah.
anything, right? So, but
Yeah.
I felt it strongly, and I was intrigued by it, but I just, I don't know, I just put it in a small box, if you will, in my memory, in
Yeah.
my brain, and leave it there, right?
And put it aside.
Put it aside for,
Right.
because at the time I didn't know what meant. I mean, first contact, there are many ways to interpret that as well.
Yeah,
What does
true.
this mean, right? What does really
Right.
this mean? I could not relate it to anything, tangible that I was doing at the time. So, but it was a very significant, powerful experience that I'm still very,
Right.
I recall very, very well.
So after that point, I know you wrote your two scientific papers, and I guess you had forgotten about this first contact incident while you're going through life doing these other things, right?
That's right. That's right.
So when did it occur to you again then that, there's a connection between this experience you had and what you're supposed to be doing in life?
Yeah, but that's where in 2017, spring of 2017, my interest in human initiated contact grew quickly, and I felt it was time to try this. And naturally, since I had this equipment and I had this experience, which I was not really thinking specifically about, but I had just naturally felt natural to say, look, why not use this capability as an aid, for this first contact experience, this human initiated contact experience. So some people call it the CE5. There are different contact modalities, close encounter of the fifth kind, CE5. And so it made sense to me that I could use or leverage this technical capability.
So let me ask you then, did you actually do research or study on the different contact modalities out there before you decide to do it yourself? Or did your interest grow in this idea of first contact and you did some research?
I knew a bit about what we call CE5 protocol. That's what I had seen videos about, and
that's Stephen Greer, right?
Yeah, right. That's why. And actually, at the time, Stephen Greer was about to give a 3-hour talk, the contact in the desert in California, at the end of May. I think it was the third week of May or something like that. And so since it kind of became naturally, I said, well, I'm going to try this. And I said, I'm going to go there. I'm going to go to that talk, and I want to prepare myself, to have a bit of experience and just get, warm myself up to this. And that's why I decided, I said, I will try that first before going there. I wanted to, prep the ground, if you will. And so that led me to try to find a contact site that will be appropriate to do this work. So I located the site here in Los Padres National Park, which is close by to where I'm from. There's a small place called Rose Valley in Los Padres National Park, and I had scouted this. I actually even found it for Google Earth, really, to see, something that seemed appropriate. I found a little lake. It was a beautiful little lake, and there was a nice spot there. So I said, I will go to that spot, right? That location. I'm going to see how that looks like, and if it looks like it's a good site, I'm going to create a small group, a CE5 group, and then we can do contact work there and, do CE5 protocols there. That was my initial intent. So this is what I had in mind. And but then before going to that contact site for the first time, I said, well, okay, I'm going to use this radio equipment, leverage this technical capability, and why not broadcast an invitation message? If there are non-human intelligences or ETs out there that are monitoring planet Earth, if I broadcast something, binary code, maybe something could happen, right? I didn't have much hope, quite honestly, because.
But you never know, right? So
you never know. So
I'll just try it, right?
Nothing to lose. So I used my own algorithm and created a binary code message where I encoded each sentences of that binary code message of different specific frequencies. And I had kind of my own algorithm to do that. The message was very primitive. It was an invitation message, inviting civilizations to meet me at that location. And, I had indicated latitude and longitude where I will be, date and time. And, a welcome message. And so that's what I blasted. So I blasted, then transmitted.
Can you tell us exactly what that message was? And when you say binary, how you blasted that message?
Can you repeat your question, Shahiroz?
Yeah, so you said you use binary and use your own algorithm to send the message. How did you decide, first of all, to use binary? And second of all, what message you were going to send them? Like, how did this all compute?
Okay, yeah, good question. Well, binary, first, to broadcast something via radio, it has to be an audio message. I know,
right,
and so, I didn't know really how to, I could have used maybe my voice even, but how to transmit latitude, longitude, or kind of text message, in a way that can be turned into an audio message. So I designed a very complicated, elaborate way to do that, quite honestly. But I said that binary code, and binary code is kind of, always heard about, the movie First Contact or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of known that it's a universal language. Mathematics is a universal language, so it made sense to use binary code.
Binary, right?
Do that, yeah. And
I'm just thinking, like, why binary? Why not Morse? Or why not? I don't know, any other methodology, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that it could have been Morse code as well. I wanted to do something unique, also in the sense of something that could not be decoded readily by people around you or listening to anybody, right? So I tried to come up with something that will go a bit more under the radar, if you will, and that also something that will stand out of the planetary background. So my thinking was that if this planet is monitored, if I transmit something that is different than everything else, it may draw attention to the message, maybe a bit more, right? But nothing more than that, really. There was nothing special about it. That's why, that's how it came about, really.
Okay.
And so a few days prior to go to this contact site, which I intended to scout for the first time and go to, I broadcasted this message, full power throughout the solar system. So again, because it's a directional antenna, I had to aim the antenna at a very specific location in our solar system to target it towards all the planets really of our solar system, Jupiter, Saturn, including all their moons, because there are many moons that are significant. If we take Jupiter itself has 67 moons. One of them, Ganymede, is as big as planet Earth, right? So it could be a planet, really.
So there's a gamut of possibilities that you could have gone with.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you just, I guess, somehow decided on this method.
That's right. So I blasted this invitation message throughout the solar system, including I targeted the sun as well and the moon. And because of the power that's involved here, as described earlier, the signal, when it's transmitted, will physically reach these planetary bodies, physically reach them, right? So, but again, I was not expecting anything. I broadcasted it a few days before, and then, we'll see what, if anything happens.
See what happens, right?
So, so the May 1st, 2017 was the day that I had, designated to go there. And so I just drove there. I was by myself.
So you sent out this message, and then you actually went to the site where you said you would be.
Correct.
Where you would want to make contact.
Correct. Okay. With Google Earth, I had identified a precise latitude and longitude where I will be.
Right.
So that's what was part of the message. And so, obviously, naturally, I wanted to
so you had to be there.
meeting.
Right.
Yeah, to be there, right, on time. So I drove there of my car alone, and went to the site. A beautiful site, was close to, as I said, a lake. And so I got there, and I said, wow, that's perfect, right? It looks like a perfect contact site. And I said, that's a good spot to come back with a group of people.
And was there other people there too, or it's just you?
Not at the time. I was alone there. There's some cars, it's fairly quiet site, but there's still sometimes, we can get a car here and there, remotely. But at night, we expect when it's late, there shouldn't be too much, activity around.
Right.
So, I got there, and then, I had not planned to do really much there, but I got there, and I had brought up my my handheld radio with me, which I had been using for many months to, for communication and to do satellite communication as well. And so I had brought that up with me, and I had set this radio to the same frequency that I had used to broadcast the message, the invitation message, not expecting anything, of course. And so I ended up after maybe 20 minutes into after arrival, I put my small handheld radio on top of my car, on the rooftop of my car, and I set up my chair and I said, why not try to meditate a little bit and relax, enjoy the scenery here, and for a few minutes, and then I would just go back home, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I did, and I sat down in a chair, and maybe 5 minutes into it, then the radio started behaving in a way that it had never behaved before.
Right.
And I was very intrigued by that, but quite honestly, I didn't make the connection at the time.
Right.
I thought it was, it was getting pretty chilly outside, pretty cold. I said, maybe the electronics is not happy with, with the cold, or I had no idea. I mean, I could not even imagine that this was maybe a reply. There's no way I would have assumed that without doing all the necessary homework to eliminate all possibilities of false positive and, things like that. So but I was intrigued. I said, what's going on with this radio? We've never did that before. And I was a bit annoyed, quite honestly, on the moment. I said, I turned down the volume a bit. I said, why is it doing this? I was trying to relax here, trying to meditate. So anyway, I ended up after a few minutes, packing everything up. It was getting cold, and I went back home. But I was intrigued by this behavior of my radio because I had never done this before. And I was intrigued because why in the middle of nowhere in a national park where there's no cell signal, there's nothing, no human installations.
Why is my radio acting so weird?
Yeah. So I said, well, I need to investigate that, right? And so I ended up in the following days keeping the radio clipped on my belt, on me, and just putting my shirt over it, but kept it on and see if the radio will start behaving this way again. My thinking was if it was due for, to an interference or something like that.
Whatever, it's going to happen again, and
it should happen again, even more in a city, right? Where I go to the bank, grocery stores, or even here at home. I mean, that was my logic. There's a little motor here. Let me close it. Can you hear the noise outside? Or I can close the window if it's too noisy.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Jimmy?
Can you hear me? I think you're froze as well. Can you hear me, Shahiroz? I think I lost you. Okay, now you need to unmute. I believe you're still muted.
Yeah, there you are.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, so why would this happen in the city, right?
That's right. I mean, it should happen in a city or
as well.
More than in the middle of a national park, if that's really related to interference or something like that.
So what did you do to test this thing?
So I carried the radio and I used my large radio station to blast massive transmissions of power to see if that will trigger the radio. I was trying to create interferences and try to see if I could replicate this behavior. I was unable to replicate this behavior. With all the technical knowledge I have and needs, I could not do it. The radio was behaving also in a very strange way. That's just not typical. So anyway, I left it at that. And then 2 weeks later, I went back to the site. I decided to go back to the site. So I repeated the experience. I was with a friend at the time, came with me. And so went back to the site and I again broadcasted the message, invitation message, with date time and drove there, same location. And then after a few minutes at the site, the same thing happened again. The radio started behaving exactly the same way that it had behaved 2 weeks prior. And it became very clear at that point that the friend I had with me was very intuitive. And, it was very clear that there was an intelligence involved here. It just, we were talking, asking questions, and they seemed to be replying to us for the radio. It's just, I'd never seen this before.
It became unusual,
Yeah. yeah, clearly there was clearly an intelligence behind the phenomenon.
Right.
It was pretty clear. I still, at the time, quite honestly, my scientific mind, I said, I needed to do more work on this to be fully satisfied, to satisfy myself that it's,
Right.
really this. And I mean, you get many questions, obviously, when you get to this kind of experience. And so, but yeah, we had a pretty powerful experience. And I became, at that point, pretty convinced there was something going on. And I had, in the meantime, I forgot to mention, before going back to the site that second time,
Yeah.
I had looked up on the internet, and I had good friends. I mean, I was on some Facebook groups about C5, and I know there were interactions with electronic equipment that was happening during C5 works. Some get
Right.
their radar detector activated or tri-field meters. So I started looking into this, and when I saw these videos of this electronic device being triggered by non-human intelligence during contact work, I say, holy cow, that's probably what it is. It's probably what it is. I started putting these pieces of the puzzle.
To put two and two together now, right?
That's right. And so after that, I kept that going. It became I became so curious and fascinated by it that I kept the work going, and I wanted to know more and try more, obviously. So I repeated the experience, and then I started having sightings, pretty intense sightings and paranormal phenomena.
So that very first day there could have been a sighting, but you probably didn't even look up to see if there was a sighting, because there was no feeling for you to do that, correct?
That's right. And
hold on one second.
Yeah, it could have been absolutely, and there could have been presence there. I mean, multidimensional beings around. I mean, I just didn't pay much attention to.
Right.
I was not prepared for this mentally, if you will. But yeah, absolutely. And so, so from there, it started really snowballing really, really fast. I started having sightings, paranormal phenomenon, like flashes of light in front of me. I remember. Right. At one time, I was standing up next to my car, looking towards there were little forests behind of trees, and the entire forest lit up in the middle of the night, like somebody like shining a spotlight to it. These kind of things. And so, and I decided from there, quickly to buy a night vision camera to try to document these sightings, at least what I could. Again, I loved anyway being in nature and being under the stars and do stargazing anyway. So this was all my passion. It's just added a layer, if you will, a dimension to my own passion that was, making the whole thing even more fascinating. And I felt that really from really the most profound part of my soul, if you will, that connection and this attraction to continue in that area and explore more. And it's like a journey, if you will, like a spiritual journey, because at the same time, it's not only physical experience that you're seeing things or hearing radio interactions, but you really, it opens up your consciousness and your mind, to what's out there. And it's a very transformative experience, obviously.
Absolutely.
And so from there, I really started developing customized messages. I work on this binary code message. It was pretty. It was a lot of work to create these messages. Just the way I was doing it was very different, if you will. And so I worked on upgrading, if you will, the way to broadcast messages. And I was hoping I could find a good way to transmit images as well. So not only I could transmit,
so what would be the benefit of transmitting images over audio? Because audio is a universal language, right? Mm-hmm. Sound is a universal, but images, I guess images can be universal language too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, images and geometric figures or sacred geometry figures, right?
Absolutely.
The ability to transmit images or my own picture, which I ended up including in all messages, really. And I addressed most of the time, often just messages of gratitude. And I became, I started studying more the field. And of course, I knew by then, we're not alone and they were there, just right there, right? And so it was, I knew that when I was transmitting these messages that they were really decoding them and acting upon them very precisely, because wherever I went in the world,
Yeah.
they were following me. If I was broadcasting a message, say I'm going to be at that location on during that weekend, let's say in Canada, or visiting family in Canada, they were following me, and so I knew they this was became very a personal relationship from that point.
Right. So it didn't matter where you were able to communicate with them then, is that right?
Exactly. There was no, and very early, quickly as well. I mean, to go to the contact site that I had, spotted there in Los Padres National Park was, a good full hour drive just to get there, an hour drive to come back.
Right.
It was extensive. So, but very quickly, the phenomenon really followed me home, and I could do it from my backyard, right? So I just ended up sitting at a small table in my backyard in a chair underneath my antenna system, and broadcasted, messages, to, meet me at certain, time of the evening or something, and they were coming and showing up, and since I had purchased a night vision camera, I was able to make good video recording, video footage of these experiences. And from there, it's that's where I spent I spent a lot of time gathering footage and sharing with the community as well. There were Facebook groups about contact work, of course, so I became
so oftentimes when we talk about contact, or when I've interviewed people about contact, people are always looking for what's the proof, right? What's the proof of the contact? So in your case, you're talking about a radio transmission in your radio. You're talking about video footage. But, I mean, there's so much video over it right now in different parts of the world that claim this is contact, this is contact, this is contact. Can you demonstrate to us that you have some kind of proof that you've definitely made contact?
Absolutely. I have so much video material that I don't know what to do with it. I have terabytes of material. So I created, over time, before going there, just maybe a note, it's important to point it out. I very early on also into this, I realized that this phenomenon was not only physical or could be physical, but was directly linked to consciousness as well.
Okay.
So it was just not a physical.
What made you come to that conclusion?
Because I had sightings. There were things that were happening that it was connected to my consciousness. For instance, to give a precise example, I had sightings sometimes. I have that on video, and I can show that a little bit later. A ship just passing over my house, and it was big. And as it was passing over, I mentally just said 3 words. I said, "Flash at me," just mentally, telepathically, if you will. In that 3 seconds later, the flash occurred, exactly as I had requested. And so I understood there were examples like that, that it was very clear that they were.
So there was a call and response in that sense then.
That's right. So it became not only a technological thing, bolts and nuts, it was very linked directly to my consciousness. There's just no doubt about it in many respects. And I had also created messages that were not only, it was not only about requesting sightings or meeting them. I had made very specific messages also, for instance, requesting assistance for out-of-body experience, where in the message I was asking to induce and assist me in an out-of-body experience in which I will be fully aware and have the memory of that experience afterward, right? And so I broadcasted the message, midday or something like that. And the very same day that I had broadcasted this request, it was probably around 9:00 p.m. I was in my bedroom. I was fully awake and aware with my eyes open, on my bed, and I was taken out. My energy body was extracting out of my physical body, and I had the full awareness of the experience of what it is to, that extraction. And I could fully remember after as well. And so that's when I really started to realize that I say, holy cow, this is serious. I knew this was serious business, but it's beyond sightings, right? It's beyond sightings because you can really have a personal relationship.
Now you have a personal relationship with this consciousness, as you call it. And so did you find that certain form of transmission was more effective than another form? Like you mentioned, audio and binary, and then you mentioned images, and we talked about sacred geometry, and we talked about your picture. And did you find in your communication that one method was more effective than another, as well, that it really did make a difference when you started including images versus audio?
I will say yes. Although it's hard to prove, empirically, it's hard to prove. It's not like you can do 20 times of that. It's not like done this way. But I will say, based on what I've seen and experienced myself, first of all, if you make requests that comes from your heart and you're very sincere in your intent of contact and pure, that's makes a big difference. I have examples of that. For instance, where I was, actually I was in my backyard, and I had made a broadcast before, but I should mention also that after a while I stopped transmitting. I transmitted with my large radio station, but I also was transmitting now with my small handheld radios, right? That seemed to be as effective, and they were replying back through it, right? But I remember just kind of projecting an intent of contact with, try to use heart energy, if you will. And a ship literally just popped up above my house, and started producing pulses and flashes. But these pulses were in sync with my heart, if you will. When I was feeling these waves of energy, these pulses were occurring at the same time, synchronized, if you will. So yeah, very powerful. So if it comes from the heart, I clearly, it makes a big difference. I noticed also that music was extremely powerful as well. I made a lot of transmissions with music, or meditating with music, and I've had the most amazing experience while broadcasting, like symphony adagio for string, or different symphonies. So they're very receptive to music as well. That's for sure. So I gathered
over. So when you say they're receptive to music, what do you mean? You send them a piece of music, and they show up and dance around in the sky to match the music?
Yeah, they will be very. I mean, just to give an example, the first time I broadcasted a symphony, adagietto, for string, for instance, while I was broadcasting, there's a light, a very bright orange light ship that just flew over me very slowly, very low, exactly as I was broadcasting. My jaw dropped. It was amazing. It was very clear that it was the sightings, was in tune with that that music. 30 minutes later, I said I need to try that again. So I chose a different tune. The same thing happened again. So this kind of proof was very evident.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating.
Yeah, very evident. So over the years, I accumulated, since 2017, accumulated tremendous amount of audio, video material, some sightings, some of radio interactions, tremendous amount of videos. And so I compiled all this material and tried to, to make some kind of montage, if you will, to, gathering, if you will, a collection of all these clips. And so I ended up producing what I call kind of mini documentary, if you will. It's not a professional production by any means, but it's just a collection of different, experience I've had. And also, I should point out a very important thing that I didn't mention here, is that early on, when I started having these interactions and these experiences, since I was in touch with other folks in the community, in the C5 community, through Facebook groups and so forth, I shared, my experience, and other people started buying the same equipment, the small handheld radios that I was using, and I shared how to do it.
You're right.
This thing really snowballed very quickly.
And
that's right. And we had
and so others are having the same experience too then.
Exactly. We had a small community, very small, kind of underground, secret community, if you will. Yeah. We kept it on the wrap, for the time being. And I saw, these folks had the same kind of experiences. Of sightings, and some people obviously have different abilities. Some may be more intuitive, so they may experience different things. Well, it's not like rigid. This thing is very fluid, based on where you're at in your awakening and evolution and spiritual journey, if you will. And so this was very clear. This was happening now. I had friends all over the world, and some in New Zealand, Australia, Japan, Europe,
Right.
Canada, the US, the same thing everywhere. It was very
Right.
clear that it was, it was snowballing, and there were non-human intelligences interacting with us. It's very clear. So it felt that it was not only one. If we assume that it is a civilization or an entity,
Right.
it's very clear that there was more than one, because the variety of type of sightings and variety of type of interactions and experiences that the folks had out there, and my own experience, indicated that there were multiple different energies involved, different civilizations or interdimensional beings or whatever it is that were on the other end. So it was very clear at that point. So I gathered a lot of evidence, and I didn't want to come out public with this information until I'm fully
certain,
sure, and that I have, I felt I would have felt in a very weak position to disclose this at the early stage, where I just didn't have much. I mean, I may have had a story about it and maybe a clip, but I wanted to have something really robust that. And when the time will come, I will feel the time will come. I was following more my heart, to be honest. As to, I said, when the time come up that it's time to release this information.
So what gave you the certainty that it was time to start sharing?
It's hard to describe. It's just intuition. Most of it is intuition, sixth sense that, the time has come. And our planet is, we know, we're going through a very difficult period on our planet. I mean, it's not new, but it's it's accelerating, and it felt the time had to be now. The time had to be now. It was the right time to release this information and allow and enable other human beings to have their own first contact experience. And I became, now today I realize more than this mystical experience I had at the time, whether the source of that information was clearly, there was a clear connection to this. And this first contact, I interpret it more today as really that two meanings. First meaning being, having our own individual first contact experience. And then once you have that first contact and that connection, you can build upon it and expand your consciousness, and it becomes a spiritual journey that's very personal. And of course, at some point, if there are enough human beings on the planet, doing the same thing, that all our voice of thousands of people being heard in space, that could very well lead to something bigger, in terms of first contact or first open contact. But at the moment, one of my objectives is to share the message and make it to enable other folks to have their own experience, because it's very transformative. And I think it's, through my research about the ancient sites and the history of, humanity, our true history we know has been hidden, and it's time for, humanity to reconnect with its galactic family. It's really, it's
so when you say galactic family, how do we even know there's a galactic family per se, or different entities out there, or different species? I know from your one metaphysical experience in 2015, you saw 3 different types of beings, but that was in a guided meditation per se, versus actually out there. How can we confirm that there's these different entities out there and different families out there? Do you have some kind of way of demonstrating that to us?
Yeah, good question. I have had through my contact work experiences that were, specific to some civilizations.
Right.
Want to put it this way?
So that's really amazing.
And and
especially if you can distinguish, right? That I sent a message to this particular place, and I got a response back from this particular place, and then I sent a message to this particular place, and the message I got back was, so I can distinguish what from the different locations that I'm talking or communicating with 2 different types of beings.
That's right. So it became, I do have literally video footage, very well documented of that. I have one, for instance, it was at the same contact site that I had been using in Rose Valley, and where, for instance, I always most of the time, I let an audio recorder always record while I was on site, because sometimes they have audio things,
Right.
phenomenon happening. So I wanted to have the
Right.
record of it. But also when I was seeing things, or I wanted to have a record of it, so I could
Right.
verbalize it out loud and mention it. And so I have the record on the audio recorder.
Right.
I do have one experience, for instance. It was in September, I think September 8th, 2018, where I felt very strongly when I got onto the side that there will be an Arcturian ship that will be signaling me, that will be flashing at me.
Right.
That's just what came through. Didn't hear a voice or anything in my head. It's not the way it works. It's just a feeling. I call it this way,
subliminal feeling. Yeah.
And an hour and a half later, and that I verbalized it, by the way, on the audio recorder. Where I have it on the recorder. I said, I feel this is what's going to happen.
Well, it's very specific when you say Arcturian, right? You're specifically somehow knowing that this is Arcturian, which is very specific, right? It's not just I'm going to have an experience with a spaceship. I'm going to have a specific Arcturian experience with a spaceship. So it's very different, right?
That's right. So I have that. And then an hour and a half later, I started seeing flashes, like stationary, above me. And I have that on my night vision camera. The ship was fairly stationary, was moving just very slightly. Again, it happened also, by the way, at the time of the night where the Earth falls in the, there are satellites out there, they fall in the Earth shadow. We cannot see satellite, it's invisible, it's impossible, they're too far. The only one that could be, visible out there where, a high orbit satellite at 30,000 kilometers, 22,000 miles away, which you can't see with your eyes, it's small. So I have evidence of that. And can I take a second break for a minute, Shahiroz?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, hold on a second.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Proceed.
So so I was saying that the ship just showed up and started flashing every 11 seconds, nonstop. So what I had foreseen or verbalized through that audio recording, which I have a video montage of that. I can share that, no problem. Just materialized. I had the ship that stayed above me for over an hour and a half. Actually, the ship never left. I had this intuition at around, it was 9 o'clock, and then at 10:25 or so, the sighting started, occurring nonstop. Every 11 seconds, I was pounded with these flashes, and I have that on a recorder. So I didn't, in that sense, as I say, I cannot confirm with 100% certainty it's an Arcturian ship or whatsoever. I've not been on a ship or cannot see this being necessarily. But I had this intuition and just materialized exactly as I foreseen. So I had predicted, if you will. So I had this kind of experience that led me to and seeing the variety of experience, the variety of sightings and energies, and there were ground contact as well. A lot of ground contact and experiences there. So it became obvious that there were different entities,
different types of entities and different types. So if you categorize, for example, in all the video footage, you've got different types of spaceships or different types of contact, or have you done some kind of, can you even distinguish between them, or because they're so high up you can't really distinguish? I lost your audio.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I pressed the mute button here.
That's okay, no worries.
Yeah, no, I was saying I don't have a good way to distinguish them necessarily. I know there's some that have more intimate knowledge because they physically interacted with different civilizations that they describe how their ships are. So I've not interacted in that kind of way, if you will, in a physical state. But after my out-of-body experience induced, who knows what's happening on the energetic state while we dream or in the dream state, so there's good evidence that there's been a lot of activity. I had also an out-of-body experience throughout my childhood. This was not new to me, and so I know that there's things happening behind the scene, or in a not necessarily
that we're not aware of.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not aware of. Okay, so let's now go to where I met you. And what was the interest in 432, or what was the interest in what David Sweden presented that day to you that made you know, your hair stand, for lack of better
That's good. Yeah,
words.
it's a good
Right?
transition. It's a good transition. So yeah, you know, I was obviously using frequencies,
Oh,
which
I
I kept.
lost you again. What's going on?
It's weird. The internet's starting to be choppy. Can you hear me now?
I lost you, Jimmy.
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Shahiroz, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, pause.
Okay. We could, yeah, absolutely. Part two. I certainly would like to show the small, you know, footage or the video montage
Yeah.
of the 20 minutes.
Well, what I was thinking was we do this a little differently than we did with David. You've shown the montage before, even in the first meeting we had together, you showed the montage. So I was going to keep it just you talking. And then every now and then I'll put an image in to demonstrate it. They can go find your videos for the rest of it.
Right.
If they really are interested, let's get them to you, to your website, and get them, you know, looking at your stuff instead of, you know, giving them everything right away.
Yeah, exactly. And just by the way, the things about the frequencies I can share a little bit, but I'm not disclosing in the public yet.
I know. I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand, but just, you know, that you were really intrigued, you could say that.
Yes.
And then they could go and research why you were intrigued or what was that, right?
Yeah.
Just to get their curiosity moving.
Oh, yeah.
And just to get them excited.
Yeah, so we can segue to that. I can talk about that briefly now, a few minutes, about the frequencies and, you know, how I became interested.
Do you want to do that? Okay.
Or we do, it may be a good time to do a part two.
Let's not do it rushed. Let's not do a rush. Let's do it properly and do a part two. I'd really like to do a really good segment with you where, you know, we get your, I don't want to be rushed.
We get into a different phase now, right? Now we'll move from the contact to more the frequencies, and and I have material about it as well. And I can also think about things to show, but yeah, that's a good, I think it's a good time to good transition to a part two, actually, at that point.
Right. Okay. So thank you then, Jimmy, for spending the time here with us and sharing with us your history with radio and with satellite and your amazing antenna that you've made. And well, we're really looking forward to figuring out where this goes from here and why you got so excited about your watching David's presentation that day. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Is there anything you want to share as a last minute thing?
Well, I will say the possibilities are limitless, right? Often it's our own imagination or own limitation that limits ourselves. I was able to make contact this way, and they were always there and always waiting for us to communicate with them. They're just waiting for us to try. So that's, you know, if I have an advice to say is just try, you know, follow your heart, follow your instinct, and try things, and amazing thing may happen and may change your life. And
maybe what we can do with everyone is maybe create a package with a radio and a Zoom teaching or a meeting where you can show people how to do this at some point in the future.
Absolutely.
That would be fun.
So thank you so much for the opportunity, Shahiroz, and I look forward to the next time.
Thank you. Thank you, Jimmy.